Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. It's that time of year again where rumours are starting to emerge as to how much time these new cars have gained over their predecessor from 2024. The Ferrari a while ago was rumoured to be a second a lap faster the SF25 than last year's SF24, and today Andreas Stella implies the new McLaren will be roughly half a second faster per lap than last year's model. That may be a good step on the final year of the regulations, but is it going to be enough to compete with the rivals and the progress that they are trying to make? Very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. We're going to start right about here because the F175 Live is coming to the O2 tomorrow evening. It's going to be live on YouTube, free to watch, so feel free to tune in. I know that many have seen today's announcements though and are thinking, damn, good job I didn't get tickets for this because, well, I think it's going to be interesting. Fair enough. If you like the actors and the people involved in this and the celebrities, I mean like the acts, not the actors, but you know what I'm saying, right? If you like the music, then fine, I'm sure it's going to be a good time. I'm not convinced it's going to be my sort of thing, but yeah, so these are the updates anyway. Jack Whitehall, an interesting pick, is going to be the host. So of course, British comedian, if you're not aware, is going to be hosting the evening. There are going to be others. Laura Winter's going to be there. Lawrence Bretto's going to be there, among maybe a couple of others as well. But that was, you know, an interesting option, I think, given the circumstances. And then here we go with the acts on the evening, and yeah, wow, I'm buzzing for this, right? So 20 drivers, 10 teams, one epic show. I'm sure Max Verstappen can't wait to turn up to the O2 tomorrow night to get a load of this. So Kane Brown, I'm not familiar with him. It seems like he's an American country singer. MGK is a funny one because you guys probably remember when he turned up to that Brazilian Grand Prix a couple of years ago, beefed with Martin Brundle on the grid walk, and then apparently left in his private jet before the race had even started. So clearly a big Formula 1 guy. Take that are going to be there. And also Brian Tyler. Brian Tyler has made the Formula 1 theme tune, right? So he's going to be presumably playing some of his other stuff as well. So, I mean, yeah, wow, I'm really excited for this. And it's going to be tomorrow night. I think it is live on YouTube to watch around the world as well. But yeah, I don't know if it's going to go down a treat or not. I'm sure the corporate sponsors there are going to be absolutely loving life. This is Red Bull. This is Max Verstappen. This is Liam Lawson in the back of what I presume is a Ford F-150 after their new partnership, of course, going forwards. And these are their new race suits for the coming season. It's dark blue. It says Red Bull. It shouldn't be a massive surprise. I thought some of these images, though, actually were quite nice and pretty well done. I don't know how Lawson's going to fare against Max this year. It's probably not going to be great, but it may be better than expected, which is probably all that he can try and achieve realistically. He also mentions how difficult he expects it to be at the start of the year. Multiple reasons for this, one of which you're teaming with Max. That's a challenge. Secondly, the car is kind of an unknown. It might not be very good, and it might be a car that only Max can tame, and that's possible. We've seen that before at Red Bull. And equally, this is the main thing, though, that Lawson was discussing, is the tracks that he's going to be driving are not tracks where he's raced before. He had a couple of opportunities, right, 23, 24, but mainly towards the end of the year, driving on, you know, tracks that he has now some more experience on, going to Melbourne, going to, you know, Bahrain, China, Suzuka, circuits like this. Okay, some of these circuits he's driven and raced before, others he hasn't, right? Like Jeddah's going to be a challenge, I'm sure, stuff like that. So he reckons it's going to be a challenge, and it will be, but, you know, the greatest, they rise to the occasion. Now, a bit of drama on this. Bottom left is Alpine and their new race suits. They put this image out the other day. It's a pretty funny one. They actually showed that Jack Doohan is still around. However, apparently Jack Doohan was too much for them because they've removed this picture from their Instagram. So it's no longer on there anymore. There's no Alpine, basically race suit on there. Now, I presume this is because there's some sponsor on this image that probably hasn't been announced yet. I don't know. I don't really care to look through all of their sponsors and find what this might be. That's my only assumption. Unless they've just made the decision that Doohan's going to be fired right here, right now, which also feels somewhat doubtful. Although there was this guy saying, Roberto Murhi from Marsa, who says, we'll see if Jack Doohan even starts the year, but I think he won't be there in 5 races. So, I mean, this is the thing. Like, if they're guaranteed to kick him out, then Would they start him? The only reason why I think they are going to start him is because Flavio Briatore said that they would. Briatore said their drivers at the start of the year will be Gasly, Doo, and after that we'll see. So, that's the only reason why I think they're going to stick by it. But unfortunately, it seems like he's been, well, any mention of his existence has been removed from the Instagram, at least of the recent times. There is one cool thing as well on Instagram spotted here from Mercedes. If you guys use WhatsApp, the Formula 1 car emoji on there has been a Mercedes after their partnership, which is pretty cool, and they've actually now blacked out that Mercedes. So the current Formula 1 emoji on WhatsApp is just like a black car with no livery on it yet until they reveal the livery in a couple of days' time. And, we'll see what that looks like tomorrow when Mercedes reveal everything. And then, of course, they turn up to, it's going to be Bahrain. They're doing their first shakedown with the new car, kind of in contradiction to some extent with the way that other teams have approached it this off-season. Before we get to the McLaren Ferrari stuff, we've got to dive into again the FIA and what's going on here with this swearing thing, because yesterday there was a big piece of drama at the World Rally Championship. So this guy, Adrien Fourmeau, he binned his car on the Saturday, and then, they tried to make up lost grounds basically on the Sunday. And as soon as it was all over, he did an interview where he said a word that he shouldn't have said. Now, it is my understanding that these fines, well, I hope so anyway, these fines that are being delivered to the drivers on this Ben Sulayem clampdown on swearing is hopefully exclusively going to be still for press conferences and official interviews after the fact. It shouldn't be relevant anyway. I think it's going to make the drivers into as robotic a personality as they can possibly manufacture. Certainly for a guy like Max, there's going to be no beating around the bush there, and I don't think you're going to get anything interesting out of him in any press conferences from now until time immemorial, to be honest. But it happened again. So it is worthy of note. The changes that we know that were made to the regulations, adding in the fines and the suspended fines and the punishments, the reduction of championship points, the suspensions from competing, all that type of stuff. I mean, as outrageous as it is for literally swearing, let's be real here for a second, that doesn't just apply to F1, that applies to all of the championships that the FIA control, effectively. F1 is the most severe in the sense that if you get punished more than anybody else does. But this guy was fined for saying, I think he basically said, we effed up yesterday. That's all he said. One F-bomb. That's all and it wasn't even, malicious. That's what annoys me more than anything. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things about this that I find frustrating, but it's not like he was calling somebody else an effing, whatever, right? And in that case, fair enough. Maybe, take a fine, like calling out the stewards or whatever. I understand on some level why that might be better for the sport and the integrity and the vision of the sport. But in this case, I just can't see any real reason why this makes sense to execute on. So they've given him a €10,000 fine and a €20,000 suspended fine over the next 12 months. So this is genuinely worse than I thought it would be. And this is like the first instance of this now, and I'm sure there are going to be more. It's going to be a shambles, in my opinion, in F1 this season. And it's going to be a talking point that is going to continue to exist, but frankly, we should not be having at all. But let's move on from that, and we'll talk about some of the cars for the new year. We talked about the Haas a couple of days ago. This is Ollie Behrman's new helmet with this logo on the top for the upcoming season. Thought that was pretty fire, to be fair. The Haas, we saw it at the filming day. They didn't officially reveal it. McLaren, however, did officially reveal theirs. And there's been some discussion and some rumours as to exactly what they've done with the car. We know that Rob Marshall, former Red Bull man, is now at McLaren on a full-time basis, and this is going to be his first car, really, that he's designed from day one. He joined quite a while ago now, Rob Marshall, but even for last year's car, he wasn't there right at the start of the work on that car, whereas this year's car he was, and it definitely seems like they have taken things to extremes in basically all regards. So, as McLaren De Kester described, the devil is in the details, even of the front suspension. There's a couple of things that maybe people hadn't noticed until now. This is what the article has to say. Very interesting things in here that we'll discuss. Of course, they revealed kind of like a fake livery, right? We'll see the car for real or the new livery for real tomorrow. But this is when things are starting to be discussed on how good this McLaren might be compared to last year's McLaren, the car that was the best over the course of the season, won the Constructors' Championship only just, let's be real, and how much better can it get? It wasn't a perfect car last year's McLaren. It was excellent. As the article describes, on the higher downforce tracks, it was basically untouchable. But at the lower downforce circuits, for the last couple of years now, they've had their issues. And outside of the Mini DRS flexibility on the rear wing, they probably wouldn't have won Baku. They went to Vegas, it wasn't so good. Sure, they made some strides. Spa was okay. Monza, they probably should have won, let's be real. But it wasn't like they were dominant at those type of tracks. So they've tried to find some solutions to this. And as Stella says, the main focus of the 2025 project was on aerodynamic efficiency. So I think this is probably what a lot of teams are moving towards nowadays. Every team knows if you add too much downforce to the car in this generation of cars, you can induce porpoising because of the way that the floor mechanics interact and all this stuff. So the teams want to add downforce. That's usually been historically in F1, at least since they realized that wings actually worked in F1. Chasing more downforce, more downforce, more downforce, more downforce, the better. But in ground effect, it doesn't really work like that if you can't use the downforce appropriately, is the way that people describe it. So sure, you want to increase the downforce where you can in some parts, but you can't necessarily do that to a great extent beyond what the car can currently deliver. So mainly what they're looking for is aero efficiency, as in straight line speed. Efficiency basically means how much downforce do we get for a given drag level, or the other way around. So if I've got a car with this much downforce, can I reduce the drag associated with that in some way while maintaining strong downforce levels? That has been the intention, I'm sure, of many teams, and McLaren apparently especially that is true. They discuss here like Rob Marshall's first real car. This involved though radical revisions, reducing the volume of key components, giving aerodynamicists greater freedom to exploit the desired advantages. And well, they discussed the new chassis, the cooling, and some other elements as well. We saw the other day some of the comparisons on the side pod and the way that the nose looks and the floor elements, and certainly the front suspension, comparing last year's to this year's. What is interesting though about this, of course, is people are going to compare McLaren's relatively substantial overhaul to what Red Bull did last year, right? The RB20. When that came around, it looked surprisingly aggressive, the way that they'd, reshaped the cooling structures of the car. And, Red Bull took a lot of risk last year to try and keep moving forwards. And they did, but then they didn't, and things all fell apart. So McLaren, it doesn't seem like have taken what they describe as a leap into the unknown, like Red Bull did with the unique cooling design, but they have gone to the extremes of some concepts, and there is a level of risk that they've gone to potentially the extreme that might potentially backfire. This is what Andrea Stella says. We were very careful in thinking about the 25 car because the MCL38, last year's car, was already competitive. Therefore, we had to carefully consider how far we wanted to go with innovation. That's what's interesting with Stella, basically an engineer, being the team principal, is that you can talk on this level where other team principals can't necessarily. In the end, we decided to take a relatively ambitious approach to make significant progress. So they definitely took some things to extremes, but McLaren aren't saying that they tried to, revolutionize the wheel. They, reinvent the wheel. They are intending to be very ambitious, but not so much that it could potentially cause a complete downfall. This is the other rumour though, that the MCL39 is supposedly a step forward, according to Stella, equivalent to all of last season's upgrades. So that apparently is what we're working with. So then you can go back and look, okay, how much did the McLaren improve last year over the course of the season? And people are talking about roughly half a second. Now, this isn't a bad number. This is a pretty impressive number in some regards because we're moving from the penultimate year of the regulations to the final year. Making substantial strides is a challenge, and if your step forward 1 year to the next is the equivalent of all of the upgrades you brought to last season's car, that's a pretty decent benchmark for where you might want to be. But I guess the question is that going to be enough? Because apparently the team has been relatively ambitious. They've taken some things to the extremes, but they've not tried to completely go crazy with the level of innovation. Apparently though, as Rosario points out, that the solutions that they've come up with to counteract the effects of the Mini DRS are in some elements very risky. So it's not like McLaren have taken no risk. They've clearly taken some serious risk, but it doesn't seem like the upside is mega, right? I mean, half a second a lap, again, when we're talking about these type of numbers, What are we talking about? Are we talking about Australia? Are we talking about Austria? Was actually what I was going for, very short lap. Were we talking about Spa, the longest lap? Like, what is half a second in Austria, half a second in Spa? It's a different story. Exactly are we comparing conditions to conditions? And also, who really knows? The simulator says one thing, reality often says something else. I think McLaren, if I had to guess, I feel like this assessment is a little bit conservative, possibly, whereas we know that with the Ferrari numbers, when we talk about that, often it tends to be a little bit ambitious, let's say, in terms of how much progress they're expecting to make. But let's take it at face value that this new McLaren is going to be half a second faster, but also is it going to be half a second faster at, let's say, Zandvoort, where it was completely dominant, or is it going to be half a second faster at, let's say, Las Vegas or Monza or something? Because that, it seems, on the lower downforce circuits, that's where they focus a lot of their attention. So I think ideally McLaren would be similar in pace at some of the tracks they were excellent at, but, let's say 0.3 a lap faster at Zandvoort and Budapest, but then 0.7 a lap faster at the circuits where they need to be. That would be optimal, but of course, things don't always work like that in reality. Now, we've got to compare this, obviously, to what other teams might have done. We've not really heard much of this lately from many of the teams on how much time they expect to gain compared to last year and all these type of things. Obviously, there's simulation data that says one thing or the other. And as I say, is half a second good? To me, half a second is a good step, but it is the absolute minimum you would expect and hope for, right? Like anything less than a half-second improvement year on year, even in the final year of the regulations, is not enough. Let's be honest, it's not enough. So I think they need at least half a second improvement if they're going to win this championship. That's apparently what they say that they've got. I mean, I'm sure that other teams up and down the grid at least have targeted and at times executed. Even McLaren, they were able to make their car, second and a half, 2 seconds a lap quicker with some of the changes they made during 2023. At least over the course of 22 to, the end of 2023 season or something to that effect. So now it becomes more challenging to add more performance, but there were rumours, let's not forget, I talked about a couple of weeks ago, on what the Ferrari is doing. Now, this is a tweet that I found from the 21st of January 2023, where there was discussion that the 2023 car was going to be 1 second faster than the Ferrari of the year before. And to be fair, that probably wasn't actually that untrue, certainly in qualifying, but, in the race it wasn't quite the same. Now, this was on the 31st of January, so again a couple of weeks ago, where there were rumours that Ferrari has gained a second. And Torini commented on this rumour and said, look, the rumours don't matter because, what are you comparing it to? Nobody knows anything about the data of Mercedes, McLaren and Red Bull. And now maybe we do know something about the data of McLaren. They say they're half a second faster. Ferrari aren't saying anything, but the engineers, they talk to people, don't they? And people start to hear rumours. So, look, the bottom line is, if it is true that Ferrari have gained a second in lap time over last year and McLaren have gained half a second, then congratulations, Ferrari, your 2025 World Constructors Champions, and likely, Hamilton or Leclerc, your Drivers' Champion. If that is not true, or things are slightly, the lines are always blurred, it's always grey, these situations pre-season, and I'm not going to believe anything until I see something actually hit the circuit. But yeah, that's what we know, or think we know as of today. Very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.